All right, everybody, this is the key to the Chapter 2 test review. You're supposed to show your work on this paper using methods we learned in class. So let's take a look and make sure that your methods that you used on your show your work paper are what I used, so you can make sure you do the right thing on the test. All right, number one, we were supposed to turn 125 thousandths into a fraction. So I wrote 125 thousandths as a fraction, and then I simplified it by dividing the numerator and denominator by 125. That gave me 1/8. So 1/8 is the answer. For number two, we are turning 1/25 into a decimal. So I was trying to get this denominator 25 to 10, 100, or 1,000, and 25 times 4 could get it to 100. So I did that to the numerator too. 1 times 4 is 4. 4 hundredths is easy for me to write as a decimal, 0.04, so the 4 is in the hundredths place. So the whole key here is you want to get this fraction to an equivalent fraction with a 10, 100, or 1,000 in the denominator, so then you can write it as a decimal. Number three, we had 48%. We were trying to write it as a fraction. So 48% is 48 hundredths. Now I can simplify that. So I simplified it by dividing the numerator and denominator by 4. So my simplified fraction is 12/25. For number four, we have the fraction 1/4. We're trying to turn it into a percent. So I wanted to get 100 in the denominator. I wrote an equivalent fraction. 4 times 25 gets me 100. So 1 times 25 gets me 25, which means this is 25%. 25 over 100 is 25%. Number five, there were two ways to do it. So we're turning 16% into a decimal. I can turn it into a fraction first, 16 over 100, because it's a percent, and then say 16 hundredths, write it as a decimal. Or you can move the decimal. So 16% has the decimal here. You cross it off, move it 2 to the left, 0.16. So 0.16 is the decimal. Same answer, two ways to do it. You only need to pick one way on the test. All right, let's look at number 6. We have the decimal 0.68 that we're turning into a percent. So 0.68 is 68 hundredths. So you write it as a fraction. 68 over 100 is 68%. Or you could have moved the decimal. So you have 0.68, cross off the decimal, move it 2 to the right. That's 68.0, so that's 68%. Let's go to number 7 on the back. Okay, number 7. You have 300%, and you're trying to turn this into a decimal and a fraction. Well, 300% is 300 over 100, and when you simplify that, you divide the numerator and denominator by 100. That gives you 3. So it's like a mixed number, 3. And then let's turn this into a decimal. So 300%, cross off that, 2 to the left, gives you 3 as a decimal. So fraction and decimal are both 3. For this one right here, we need to move the decimal. So we have 0.8%, cross it off, move the decimal 2 to the left. That gives you this decimal, 0.008. Now you can turn this into a fraction. It's 8 thousandths. Simplify it by dividing by 8. That gives you 1 over 125. All right, number 9. So you have 0.02, you're turning it into a percent. You need to have done it in one of these two ways. You can say this is 2 hundredths, so it's 2%. Or you can cross off the decimal, move it 2 to the right, and show that now it's just 2.0, which is 2%. Over here, we have 4.5. We need to turn it to a percent, so you turn it into an improper fraction. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So we have 9 halves. We want to get 100 in the denominator so we can find the percent. So 2 times 50 is 100. 9 times 50 is 450. So this is going to be 450%. All right, comparing and ordering fractions. These were our 4 fractions. the first thing you have to do is find the least common denominator. So I had to find the least common multiple. I looked at the biggest one and I realized 9, 6, and 3 can all go into that number. So I set up equivalent fractions. 7/9 is equivalent to 14/18. 5/6 is equivalent to 15/18. 2/3 is equivalent to 12/18. I have 18 now in the denominator of all four, so I can compare the numerators. This is the least, then this, then this, then this. So 2/3, then 13/18, then 7/9, then 5/6. For number 12, I need to convert all of these to decimals. So 23/25, I can convert it to a decimal by putting 100 in a denominator. So write an equivalent fraction by multiplying by 4. 92 hundredths is 0.92. All right, now this one, 93%, you can move the decimal over and turn that into the decimal 0.93. Or 93% is 93 hundredths, which is written as 0.93. These are my three numbers. This is the smallest, then this, then this. So 0.89, then 23/25, then 93%. All right, estimating with percents. So 51% of 62 is like saying 50% of 60. So what you can do is you have to turn the percent into a fraction, and then you can either set up a diagram or you can set up an equivalent fraction. So 50% is 50 hundredths. Simplified that into 1/2. So 1/2 of 60. You can draw the bar diagram here. 1/2 of 60 is 30. Or you can set up 1/2 equals what over 60? Multiply by 30, and it's 30. For number 14, 78% of 148 is estimated to 80% of 150. So you first turn it into a fraction. Then you can either do the bar diagram or you can do the equivalent fraction. So 80% is 80 over 100. Simplify that down to 4/5. We're trying to find 4/5 of 150. So I'm going to set it up like this if I do a bar diagram. 150 divided by 5 is 30. 4 30s is 120. Or 4/5 equals how many over 150? You have to multiply by 30 and you get 120. So either way, 80% of 150 is 120. All right, looking at number 15. Number 15, we're trying to find 44% of 205. You could do it one of these two ways. Turn 44% into a fraction and then multiply by 205. Or, so let's go through that one. 44 times 205 is 9,020. 100 times 1 is 100. Simplify it by dividing by 20. 451/5. In your calculator, if you do 451 divided by 5, it's 90.2. Or, move the decimal. 44 decimal, take it off, move it 2 to the left. Now you've turned this into a decimal. 0.44 times 205 in your calculator is that 90.2. All right, this way you have to do the move the decimal because you have this situation right here of a percent with a decimal in it. So 1.4%, turn it into a decimal, cross it off, move it 2 to the left. That gives you 0.014. That decimal times 85, right here, is 1.19 in the calculator. Okay, 10 is 40% of what number? Well, if you set up a percent proportion, 40% gets set up as 40 over 100. Now we want to know 10 is the percent of what number? So we set it up like this, and what we know is, before this was here, 40 divided by 4 gets you 10. So 100 divided by 4 gets us our answer, 25. So 10 is 40% of 25. Now, if by chance you did the little number line, you would have set up this number line where 10 was at the 40%. So I went by 20s, 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And then down here, I had to break it into 5, 10, 15, 20. 25 is where I was at the whole. So 10 is 40% of 25. Now for number 18, we had a story problem. I'm going to look back at that story problem. The memory card on Melcher's digital camera can hold about 400 pictures. He used 24% of the memory card while taking pictures at a family reunion. So how many pictures did he take? So we're trying to find what is 24% of 400. So 24%, that part of the proportion is set up with 24 over 100. And then this other part, we know that he could hold a total of 400. So what's 24% of 400? 100 times 4 is 400. 24 times 4 is 96. So 24% of 400 is 96. I wonder if anybody found it this way. 24% equals 0.24 times 400. So in the calculator, 0.24 times 400 gives you 96. So you may have still used this old way to do it, or even 24 over 100 times 400. So you could have gone that way too. 24 times 400 is 9,600 over 100. Divide both by 100, and you still get 96. Cool. So many ways to do it. These are just different ways. All right, now let's check the vocab. An equation that compares part to whole to percent out of 100 is called percent proportion. When you have two fractions and you want to know which one's greater, you can't compare numerators until you find the least common denominator. Now to do that, you have to find the least common multiple, but what we're shooting for is the least common denominator. How do you find the least common denominator? Well, that's where you find the least common multiple. And then 22, an equation stating two ratios or rates are equivalent is called a proportion. And which of the following is a ratio that compares a number to 100, a percent? All right, the test is going to be set up this exact same way, just with different numbers.